Welcome to the Emo Social Club podcast, broadcasting to you live from emosocialclub.tv. I am Brian.
And I'm Lizzie, and we're here this evening with the author of Namedropping book, Jameson Ketchum. Thank you so much for hopping on, especially because it is literally 100 plus degrees where you are.
Yeah. I this morning I kept checking, and then I was like, this isn't helping anything. Like, it's not giving me any comfort to know how hot exactly is.
Yeah.
But it was 115 yesterday, and Oregon is not known for these kind of temperatures, so we're all huge wimps about it.
I've seen so many people in California just like, I guess I'm just a baby now because I've been living here, and it's a lot of people that are transplants from, Midwest or like East Coast that like come to the West Coast, and they're like, well, now I'm all like privileged with this like fairly nice one season throughout the year, and so everybody's freaking out now during a heat wave. Like,
well, and everyone always talks down about Oregon, about it being, or the Northwest in general, that it's always just rainy and gloomy and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I enjoy that. That's great for me. So as soon as it hits like 65, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm a wimp about it for sure.
Sweet. Well, we'll let you introduce yourself to the podcast and why we have you on and what's going on with you. So we'll let you get to that.
Yeah, and thank you guys for having me on. I really, really enjoy your show a ton. But yeah, as Lizzie said, I have a book coming out next month, in July, called Namedropping. And basically, I've been a music journalist for the past 15 years. I have my own podcast, as well as just working for every magazine you can name that's sort of in this emo, Warped Tour, whatever you want to call it, scene. And I just decided I wanted to put together a collection of some of these stories. And I think the more I did it, it was definitely like, as much as you can be like, oh, anyone can do what I can do, or like anyone has these experiences, I think having them all collected one place, I was like, this might be a thing. This might be something that other people will enjoy. And obviously, as you guys know, the nostalgia factor right now for this era is super high. So
yeah.
I'll play it off like I did it at the right time on purpose.
It really is like that time now where it's the nostalgia, and it's also like a bunch of newer artists that are using that nostalgia and building off of it. And like now that I was talking about this, I recently just got back into an emo cover band, which has been a real choice on my part because I did it for a couple of years, and like it was just it was before my chem reunited, so I felt like, oh, we're good. Like, my chem isn't around. Fall Out Boy doesn't play the early stuff. Panic doesn't play the early stuff. We're good. We're set. And now my chem reunited, and I'm like, how the fuck am I doing this again? We already have it all. It's all coming back. So why do it again? Yeah. And I think that like there is still that excitement over the old stuff, but I think it's this newer excitement with a lot of new things too. So there's a lot of like the history, but also the new stuff that's coming out now that like everybody's pretty excited about, I think.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that. I'd be curious to know what you guys think, because I know that some bands I feel like I had a really nice goodbye to, where it was like, oh, this is ending. Yeah, they might come back in a few years and do a reunion, but like for me, like for now, I'll just believe this is it and really like enjoy this final show, enjoy this moment. And then there's something about when they come back around that you are kind of happy, but you're also like, was this the plan? Like, like, are you capitalizing, on that same nostalgia thing? Like, I don't know. I'm curious if you guys are ever sort of like, I don't know, just not disappointed, just sort of like disillusioned with like, everyone goes away, but don't worry, they'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like for me, because a lot of these bands that have come back on this like new reunion run, I was too young to go and see them. So for me, it's like, oh, cool. I can finally go and see them. Now, are they playing all the stuff, like their older stuff that I really, really liked and enjoy? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the band. But for the most part, I really enjoy it. I mean, I know there's a lot of other people who are like, this isn't going to happen. But if you've just seen like just how reunion tours have happened, even for like vintage rock bands like AC/DC and like Aerosmith and other things like that, you see them like go on and off of their own personal hiatuses, and also being like, this is my last tour, LOL JK. So I'm like, Ozzy Osbourne has like 4 last tours in the last probably like 10 years.
Yeah.
And like he's still trying to, make up for the ones after COVID and being diagnosed with Parkinson's and all this stuff. And I'm like, I just feel like that's the natural cycle, unless it is such a small band to begin with. And they're like, okay, maybe we'll do like one reunion show in like 10 years and that's it at like a hometown show. Like you've seen that happen. Yeah. I feel like it's just normal and natural. But I think like to the outside eye, unless you are somebody who's like really involved in like the industry or music in general, you're not going to see those patterns. And you're just going to be like, now this is just not fun.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that makes me feel better because I couldn't think of many bands where I'd be like, well, I was too young for that. But like even just you saying that, I'm like, I never got to see At the Drive-In. Like I was, just maybe like young high school or something, and could have gone, but didn't get into a band like that till later. So that's a really good point. But I feel like that gap is closing more and more. Like I feel like when Under Oath did it, it felt very like, man, I feel like this just happened. I feel like you just did this big dramatic breakup, and now you're teasing coming back. So I feel like when the gap gets closed, I don't know. And it's nothing against those bands at all. I think it's just like, it's hard to navigate a little bit. It's hard to know how to feel about it.
Yeah. I'm curious when there's like, we talked to a couple bands where it's like, it's a money thing. Like the band is not doing financially well and they got to take a break, but there's still people that are passionate about them. They still like their music and they're like, well, we might as well come back now because when we were 17 in a van playing Warped Tour, we didn't have money, and now we have kind of established lives. We can take some time to go and do that thing, and it benefits everybody now, as opposed to back in the day when it was like, we're not making any money, we're broke 17-year-olds, and that's okay. It's just now we want to like get back out there into the world. Then there's like the Yellow Cards or the Motion City soundtracks where it's like, if you wanted to break up and do other stuff and create new art and create something in a different vein, then that's fine. But just make it a hiatus. Don't make it like this permanent thing. Yeah. Because then it feels like you're using that as a marketing ploy to get people to come to it rather than actually doing it for like the purposes. The Chariot is a band that I really I barely listened to them, but I went to their shows every time they came through Chicago because I just loved their live set so much.
Insane. Yeah.
So fucking good. And they were like, I think did it in a very like poetic and artsy way, the way they always do everything, because their album was called Long Live. And it's like, that feels right. Long live the Chariot. We're breaking up. We're done. And then they haven't gotten back together. They haven't announced anything. And they went on to do 68 and Fever 333. And it's like both fantastic bands, both wonderful live, both great to see. So like, we're good. We don't need the Chariot to reunite at this time. And it feels like they don't need it either because they're both having their own successes separately. So I think there's different paths to it, I guess.
I'm a huge Chariot fan for sure. And even, I feel like even if I didn't love a lot of their music, like, if you see them live once, you're a fan because it's just total chaos. But like with Furnace Fest coming up, a lot of people keep bugging Josh Scoggin about like, well, this would be the time. There's all these other bands at Furnace Fest that are going for it. And so far, nothing. Yeah. So there's definitely part of me that respects just like, it's done and it's over. It's not coming back. And that because it kind of adds that legendary status a little more. Yep. If you got to see them at the time, then you're kind of like special for that. I don't know. That's probably very elitist to say. That's very like, I heard him first.
Yeah. That's like, Sex Pistols, like doing one record, or the Doors doing one record. I mean, there are deaths involved in that. So I guess that's why they're not getting
dying before more can happen there, first of all.
I mean, it's like, well, Nirvana, it's like, well, obviously we're not going to get that because Kurt Cobain died. So it's like,
what?
I'm sorry. Breaking news. Breaking news from really 1996 crazy. Here. 94 or whatever.
I don't have a computer.
I've never heard Nirvana. I've never heard of him.
Nirvana? Is that what this shirt is? It's knocking off.
Yeah, exactly. It's just. I think that we leave a lot of those legends to band members who have died, as opposed to like giving it to the band has died, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, That's super. I don't know. It's super interesting. I have to say too, the final Chariot show that came through Portland, my car broke down on the way there, and I didn't get to see it. That's always what I think. I mean, I've seen them so many times before. Like it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was that final time, I was so ticked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know there's bands that have been criticized for doing cash grabs. The first time that Blink came back, I remember seeing an interview with some of the Taking Back Sunday guys, and they were like, when they came back with John and Sean, which is such a big deal, the original members, they were like, so are you going to tour? And they're like, well, we want to put an album out first because we don't. And I think they alluded to Blink a little bit, but they were like, because we don't want it to look like that. We don't want it to be like, hey, these guys are back. How legendary is this? Come see our show. They were like, we want to put some work in first and like prove that we're doing it. We're doing the work before we come out and see you. Which I thought was cool.
Yeah. That's another, sorry, I know we're getting into like this breakup side of things, but I'm also just like, yeah, because there's also like the lineup change, which is like another thing. Like if Fall Out Boy goes on hiatus and they come back with the same 4 people, it's a hiatus. It's not a breakup. It's just like, we took some time. If Motion City Soundtrack says we're breaking up and then they come back later, it was a hiatus. If Taking Back Sunday loses a member, writes a bunch of albums with a new member, and then they lose that member and come back with the old members, that's not really like a hiatus or anything. Like they've been an active band the whole time. They're just like kind of switching it up and going back to like different lineups, which is going to be like a different era of the band. It's all interesting.
You've really thought about this, Brian.
It's all like, I mean, it's all semantics and it's all like, you know, it's whatever. You can do whatever you want in the music industry. I think people put too much, there's too much behind a breakup or a hiatus or whatever. There's too much emotion behind it where, I mean, you're going to be sad when my chem breaks up. I cried at the bar that night, but I found out I was at a bar and I was just like, no.
You said no, absolutely not.
I was like, no,
not allowed.
I've had too many drinks for me to feel this right
Brian,
now.
Yeah.
Lizzie, were you there to witness this?
No, I was in high school, so I think high school, early college, actually. Yeah, no, I was in early college because Danger Days came out when I was a senior in high school.
Right.
Oh man,
I'm way too old.
I'm not gonna say my age. I'm not gonna say my age now.
Look, you and I are probably more in that same region where it's like this. The experiences of the nostalgia are a bit at a different location for me and Lizzie. Like, I was in college for a lot of this. She was in high school.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I can finally like relive like what it was like to be that. I mean, because when like in 2001 I was like 8, so I didn't like, I was like 6 to 8 years old. I was like not old enough to comprehend most things. My comprehension was I love Barbies and Barney and Barbie Girl by Aqua. That's it. I had empty energy because I was a child.
Yeah,
that song is on my gym playlist. Barbie Girl. So I have no shame in that game. I do. It's funny. So I do like to. I'm 35. The reason I like to say that is because you do find out like if someone's around your age, you almost recalibrate to like, oh, so you know what I'm talking about with this band talking about this. But I love also knowing that people younger than me were as obsessed and as involved because that bodes well for like the future as it goes on, you know? Yeah. And you're right. There's different nostalgia points and I definitely get into that like older brother mentality feeling of someone, you know, if someone's just like, well, my chem was the beginning and end of emo. And you're like, wait a second. And I got to chime in here. But which is very silly, but I love that someone else feels that strongly because I would feel that strongly about Dashboard or Save the Day or something.
Yeah.
So I just love that it still exists. Yeah.
So in this book, you focus a lot on like the Christian rock movement, which I think is really interesting because we haven't talked with a lot of people who have either listened to that type of music as much or was really heavily involved in it. So I saw a lot of that really insightful. Actually, one of the deans at my undergraduate college helped found Cornerstone. So I always thought it was like kind of weird and interesting to see this because I mean, I know Devil Wears Prada and like other bands like this, while they've kind of migrated away from that Christian rock or white metal label, it's still pretty prominent. And there's actually like been a kind of resurgence of it, at least with like Flyleaf on TikTok. It's been trending. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you kind of like, how have you taken a lot of this? Because I know reading through your book here, It was a lot of, I guess, like, the Christian youth type vibe, like, young life energy, which I personally never really experienced, but I had a lot of friends adjacent in high school who, were involved in that, and some of them still are, but a lot of them aren't. How has it been to interact in the scene and industry where within the subculture, you do have a lot of individuals who are, like, maybe like, "Oh, I'm not really into it," or are very, like, vehemently against religion because there's a lot of, negative connotation and experiences people do, unfortunately have. Has that been something that has ever, like, really heavily affected you or deterred you from anything?
I almost think that might be like the whole reason I wanted to write this book was that I was seeing stuff that I loved and didn't love in that scene, and same for whatever, let's just call it secular for the sake of this, in the non-Christian music scene. And I was getting more and more impacted by the non-Christian stuff. Whereas if you grew up in the church and you grew up doing the youth group thing, all that, you have, at all times you have a chart on the wall that's like, hey, I see you love Nirvana. You should listen to Skillet then. Like you always had the Christian, the Christian quote equivalent of a band, and they were never accurate, whatsoever. It was the most generic thing. If you love Nirvana, you love Skillet, like nothing. Yeah, so dumb. But there was always that thing. There was always like, if you're getting into this world, this non-Christian music world, let us help you find something that will be similar, so you stay in this bubble, so you stay safe or something. It's probably how I got into like MXPX, which is like the first band I was ever obsessed with. I was probably listening to Green Day, and then it was like, oh, there's this band that sounds pretty similar, which totally don't. But as a kid,
Right, you're like, eh.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, my parents, I don't have to hide this under my bed if I go buy this album, like, or my dad might buy it for me. How amazing! So I do think now, I think it's pretty much completely integrated now. I think there's probably bands that you might not expect that do have like a stronger faith background. It's just not in the forefront for them in their career. And then there's bands like August Burns Red who are very outspoken about it, but who don't dumb down their music. They don't dumb down their lyrics or anything. They're still, I'd say most people probably consider them one of the bigger metal bands in that scene, if not maybe the biggest, especially consistently. But even today I was watching a live that Jake, their singer, and Matt, their drummer, were doing. And Jake does a ton of nonprofit work. He's got his own nonprofit called Heart Support. And they were doing this conference at his gym that's like, hey, come to this conference and we'll teach you different workouts depending on what level you're at. We'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about music, of course. Like, I'm so impressed with where some of these bands are and actually putting like the rubber to the road and not just being like, hey, be good to each other. We do this for Jesus. All right, let's rock. Like that was that was like the thing for so long, was just that quick little thing. So bands that have discovered, hey, this should just be about relationships and connecting with kids and connecting with their fans without any sort of hidden agenda, I think has been huge. So I don't feel like there's as much of a division anymore. And it was a big thing for me to find out that I was getting sort of more, more energy or just more good stuff from some of these bands that wouldn't be played at church. I wouldn't find like in the youth group CD closet, if that makes sense.
Not a lot of
young life energy. Yeah, we can get into that.
I used to I still do love Under Oath and Devil Wears Prada. Like, I'm still a fan of those bands, and listening back in the day, I was like, you'd play it for somebody and you'd start hearing Mike Ranica screaming and you go, that's Christian. People are like, what?
Right. And it was such a funny thing that like screaming inherently wasn't okay to do. Yeah. That's not Christian if they sound like that.
There was this very weird ramp up of bands who, and I think that like, we talked about like how there is that like sort of non-punk ethos about being religious. But then like I went to Sounds of the Underground that Devil Wears Prada was on, and they all come out and they all put their hands together and they prayed on stage before they started their set. And this is the year when Guar is on it and Every Time I Die is on it. And, just it's a situation where, this is a room full of people who are down with Satan and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's this band coming out that's praying, and they're not saying anything to the crowd about it. They're just praying, like visibly on stage. and the crowd is booing. The crowd is like, oh my God, what the fuck is this? And then next thing you know, they just rip a set. And I was actually like really impressed by sort of the flipping on its head of the like, we are Christian in a very non-accepting situation, showing ourselves as that, working as hard as we can to put on a good show for you as an audience, and hoping to get some fans here just of our music, not of anything else, but like knowing that they're entering that realm of like, this is dangerous for us to do.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I talk about this a lot in the book. Like most of the touring that I did in my 20s was with like a Christian hardcore band. And they would, for at least the first half of those tours, they would pray on stage, they would do all that stuff. And it was so interesting to hear the conversations after of like, are we doing this for show? Are we doing this so that, kind of like you said, like do it for show and then just come out and you know, play this insane show and kind of show them like we can be badass too. There was always this struggle of like, are we doing this to show off a little bit and to like be like, hey, just so everyone knows, like this is a Christian band that's about to play. So it's, I don't know, it's interesting, but somebody like Prada, of course, is going to like blow the doors off the place regardless.
Yeah. So
I don't know where it's at today. I don't know that I feel like in a lot of ways, I feel like that really intense Christian hardcore scene ended maybe like 10 years back or so, or there's maybe just not as many around.
Yeah. I guess it kind of goes with metalcore and just like it feels like metalcore and Christian, like Christian metalcore was its own specific thing. Like there was like pop punk and there was other sides of it, but like for me, this might just be for me because I was way more into metalcore back in the day, and like those are the bands I would see at Warped Tour. And all that is like, that was my scene. And so there just felt like there was a lot more in that realm than there was in some of the other genres.
Right.
So maybe just as like metalcore is kind of drifted off into more like pop punk and emo or EDM or any of the other things that came after it. Like maybe it just kind of faded away too.
Yeah. I was just earlier today, I was watching, it's on YouTube now, but it's a Tooth and Nail documentary. And Brandon Ebel was talking about he started this radio station in college, and the point being he wanted to play more Christian bands and just sort of like slip them in between like bands that everyone already knew, because he believed like they're just as good. This isn't a watered down thing. And he was like, also like he's like, I get that there's this punk rock thing against religion. That totally makes sense. But also what's more punk rock than kind of like doing whatever you want and talking about whatever you want. And he's like, but I see both sides. And I was like, you're right though. Like, you can't be like, yeah, screw everything. There's no rules except for that. You can't talk about God.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, like it's cheesy, but I love that he was like, well, what's more punk rock than, doing whatever you want all the time?
True. Can't argue with the logic of that.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, so I saw Skillet live at Summerfest, and I knew that they were a Christian religious band, and this was like years and years ago, and I was fine with it. But I will say, they started preaching really heavily on stage for at least 10 to 20 minutes of their set, like in the middle of their sets. And I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to vibe out and hear Monster, because that was like their main single at the time. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to go see Death Cab for Cutie instead and cry, because there's a little bit too much going on here. That is not the music. And like, I get that that's their vibe, but I was just definitely like, hey, this isn't like the time and place, I guess. I just felt it was like very strange. But also like recently, like Skillet came out saying like, I support the insurrection. And I was like, yo, dude, that ain't it. And there's a lot of like these bands on, like, even like I mentioned earlier, TikTok, like Flyleaf, All Around Me is becoming like a trending sound. And there's all these like, OG like emo kids, kids from the scene. They were like, hey, but like Lacey Sturm went to like conversion therapy and preaches that it's so great and like doesn't like LGBTQ. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And I'm just like wondering how that kind of has worked out, because I know obviously like not all Christians have that type of mindset. I get it. Everybody who's religious has different mindsets. I'm Catholic. I don't have a lot of these, negative mindsets, but I just wonder, like, how does that for you as somebody who seems, pretty not like that, like kind of like see that disconnect within the scene, and how is that something that, you feel about it?
Yeah. I so badly, when you were talking, wanted to be like, well, conversion therapy does work, and John Cooper is right. Like, just throw everything off. Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you asked that, and I'm glad that whether it was my book or talking to me for 10 minutes would show that. But yeah, I think that's another thing that's sort of just blown up that Christian scene a bit is knowing that it's not that cut and dry. It's not that, like, if you are a Christian, then here's your 20 things that you need to make sure you believe in and defend. It's way more black and white. And so I got sent John Cooper's book a few weeks before he started kind of like getting in, I don't want to say in trouble, but I guess like being more talked about because of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had got sent his book. I'd read a few pages and for my podcast and stuff. And then, yeah, I saw that and I was just like, oh man, like, that's just such a bummer. I kind of just put it on the shelf and was like, well, I'll check in on this growing story here and there. But you're right. It's a bummer to see that. I know that there's also, secular bands that maybe believe some of that stuff. It's all a little bit gray. So I think it's been a big thing for me personally, just to realize that, for one, that there's not any one right way. And then it really upheavals it causes a bit of an upheaval in your belief system, because you have been taught these are the right things. And you look at somebody like John Cooper, who I remember listening to them in like 7th grade, and it's amazing that they've come this far and they've done so well for so long. But it's just sad to see. It's sad when you dive deeper into someone that you maybe looked up to or have listened to for years, and you're like, oh, that's what you believe, and that's what you're like toting.
You're like, that's not.
Oh man, yeah, that's not. Yeah, that doesn't line up with. Yeah, like I can still like one of their songs or whatever. I guess I don't know. That's a very murky conversation, I know, but
yeah.
Yeah, it's just more makes me sad, I think, and it's not that I have it all figured out, by any means, but yeah, really the big answer being it bums me out to hear some of these. It bums me out to hear some stuff. And then at the same time, I can look back at a band as old as DC Talk, who was maybe one of the first like bands I remember hearing in general, super conservative Christian band. And some of those members are going like, nah, like that's not cool. Like, and it's okay to grow and learn and even make mistakes. Maybe I'll change my mind on this in 5 years or 10 years. But like, I just want people to know it's okay to do that. So those are I'm way more on board with that type of thing, I would say.
Yeah. I don't remember it being so close-minded, if that's the word, or like I remember there was this big interview that came out on Warped Tour with Fat Mike and Under Oath.
Yeah,
this is like the interview where he was like giving it to Under Oath, just like really questioning them on everything, and Under Oath was really holding strong to their ideals, which I think it was a lively debate, I guess. It wasn't really like Fat Mike, I feel like, is the kind of guy to be more like, I'm going to try to get you to do something.
He's more of he's like an antagonizer, but that's that's his get.
That's his get.
Which I don't know if that's like always the greatest, but I think for like what NoFX is and who Fat Mike is as his identity, like it fits, and we get it in the scene. Like it makes sense to us. In some weird way, it makes sense to us.
And then to be that like older guy and then like have that sort of behavior and be known for that, and then to approach a younger band because they're Christian and like joined like one of their, I'm explaining it just for anybody who doesn't know, but it was just sort of him sitting in like a youth a church thing, a little prayer circle, them talking, them having their time together as the Christian bands on Warped Tour, and he was joining it to kind of have a debate with them. It was all filmed. I forget where it was posted, if it was All Press or if it was somewhere else, but
I know AP really jumped on it. I remember that.
It was a really big thing that year, because I remember then the year after, or maybe it was like later that year, Under Oath broke up. Like, so that was like right before a lot of stuff happened within the band. And it really changed their trajectory, I guess. And I don't know if they're correlated, but it feels like there was a lot there. And I don't really remember, aside from like those kinds of discussions, those kinds of debates, there being really any pushback like really hard things to like deal with about somebody being Christian, or like that non-open-mindedness or that not willingness to have a conversation or anything like that back at the time. And I don't know where that started or came from.
Well, and Lizzie, I love what you said about going to that Skillet show, because there's many bands that have said this since then, but I always think of the band Emery talking about, you know, they get yelled at from the crowd saying like, are you going to talk about Jesus? As if, you know, if they don't say it, then people are going to hell that night or something. And they were the first people I think that I heard that were like, you didn't pay to hear me preach. Like, you paid to hear these songs that you love. So I would be doing you a disservice if I spend 3 song lengths talking about something that you don't care about. Like, and if you want to talk about it, fine. Like, I'll be around later or whatever. Like, it should come up more naturally than me preaching at you and wasting your time if you don't want to hear it. I remember going to like Sleeping Giant shows or For Today, who were really intense about preaching. And, you know, for me, I didn't mind it because it was something I enjoyed hearing. But I just also remember sitting in the back of venues and watching kids who were, you know, just there to mosh and there to dance and stuff, just, you know, roll their eyes and be like, all right, well, I'm going to go take a piss now, or I'm going to go get a beer now. Like, I'm going to go do something else during this because this is not what I paid for. And and I remember being like, yeah, I'd be mad too. I didn't pay for the show, but if I did pay $20 for the show, I'd be pretty ticked. So yeah, I think it's just a bit of a disservice and just impersonal at the same time.
True.
Yeah. And let's talk about Hope Corps. So it was a magazine that you ran, and you also, obviously, in your past, you worked with a lot of nonprofits, including To Write Love on Her Arm. So if you just wanted to just talk a little bit more about that, because I personally never heard of Hope Corps, but a lot of the references you made sounded like a pretty modern, but just like Christian rock version of like Alt Press or Substream.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what we thought at the time we were doing. Hope Corps was a radio station started by this guy named Jeremy at my college, and he knew, like, I went to college in a super small town, so to find anyone he was like wearing an Amber Lynn sweatshirt one night at a bowling alley, and I was like, I have to go talk to this guy. There's definitely no one else here that is going to be listening to this band. I have to be friends with this person. So that I found out he had this radio station he was just starting up, and I was like, well, I don't know anything about radio. I don't really care, but like, I'd love to do a magazine someday or be, you know, write for one or start one. So we just sort of made that branch off of that. And thankfully, like our first issue was, we had like Stephen Christian from Amber Lynn on the cover of the first one. And I had just sort of made these connections before that I didn't really know what they were for. I think I was just excited about like networking and getting to know these bands, even though I had no purpose for getting to know them yet. That just led to, we did an issue, I think we did something like 32 issues or something like that. So I did it for about 2 years. And that's also what I usually point to as the end of like that Christian hardcore scene, was because we were like, I think we can keep doing this, but I don't feel like there's anything new happening. Like, I think we had everyone we wanted, and now we're just going to be on repeat. I mean, we had Thrice a few times, Switchfoot, like these big names, but yeah, we were just like, I think it's just kind of, if it's over, let's not beat a dead horse, you know? And the nonprofit stuff, I mean, To Write Love is still going strong today. I certainly found out about them because of music, because of Switchfoot, because of Aaron Gillespie from Under Oath. And I think there was this really cool time. I don't know that it's still this way, but there was this really cool time where there was all these nonprofits sprouting up that were connected with music, that were like, they found, you know, they figured out, oh, if I can get this singer, this drummer to wear this shirt, you know, it'll spread awareness. And honestly, like, getting to know To Write Love and working there, this was 2008. It sounds so naive, but like, I don't think I knew what Self Harm was until I read and I like got into what To Write Love was about. So there was all this stuff that just felt really like, oh man, people do this. This is awful. Oh, and there's an entire organization, multiple ones dedicated to helping people with it. That's incredible. So there was a really cool time where I felt like there was singers, there was just people that were connected to the music industry starting nonprofits. And I really enjoyed my time at every one that I did. But looking back and kind of being like, man, I worked for this one and this one and this one, it was certainly like a trendy thing. And it wasn't that they weren't doing good work. I tend to look back and question my own motives more so. I worked for Faceless, which was Stephen Christian from Amber Lynn. I was his nonprofit at the time. And was a cool thing. They were like popping up so much. But I think because I was so involved with music, I was like, is this also a thing I can get into? Will this lead to like other opportunities in music? And it was a hard thing to be like, do I really care about this topic? If I don't, then that's really scary, and I don't want to be that person.
Really interesting. It's like what I was thinking when you say it, and I don't mean to be like to push anything off, as it's not, you know, doing some meaningful work in some way. Even if it helps one person, it's good work. But it's like you would start a nonprofit or you would start a clothing company as an artist.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like, if you could do either one, do you really care about one of them that is doing that hard work? You know, that good work for somebody. I
loved buying like merch from bands that had their own clothing company. I'm wearing a Smooth Sailing shirt right now, which was Steven from Go Radio. That was his company. And I have a bunch of his, just because we were friends, and I have a bunch of his stuff. But you're right. It was a clothing company or a nonprofit. And if you started a clothing company, 10% should go to a nonprofit.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And you're just like, where did this come from? Who is this?
I remember it's like 10% will go to Write Love in Our Arms or another one. But yeah, it was like 10% will go to this. Wow.
Invisible Children. Yeah. I mean, Bryce Avery had one. I remember I had shirts from his stuff. Everyone repped Invisible Children. Like, it's just, it's a cool thing. Like, it's so cool in concept. I just wonder how many people like stuck with it or took it seriously. Like, even when I was at To Write Love, bands, if we went to a festival, bands would ask for shirts, and, you know, we couldn't just give them like away willy nilly. But I remember a few people saying like, yeah, I gave this band a few shirts, and then they were like, what is this again? So it definitely just became like a cool, you know, thing to wear like a To Write Love shirt. It's also just a funny marketing thing to think that John Foreman from Switchfoot wore a shirt on stage, and the next day, like, To Write Love blew up. Yeah. And I wasn't at that show or anything, but just learning the backstory of To Write Love, that Jamie Turkowski, who started the organization, was friends with John Foreman from Switchfoot, and John threw on the shirt before going out on stage, and the next morning Jamie's inbox was full. And I just thought, oh, that is really cool, and that really speaks to the power of like music and fans. But I've never like seen a dude on stage wear a shirt and then been like, I got to go check that out. Yeah. So that is just sort of that's a pretty magical thing, you know, pretty magical start to something like that. And here he is, 15 some years later, still doing it. So it's great.
I guess that connection of like to connect the clothing company to nonprofit again, but it's like To Write Love in Our Arms also had some really cool shirts. So it's kind of like that. It's like the one that like kind of made a name for itself by having the cool shirts, having them available like at Warped Tour. If you see somebody on stage wearing it and you're like, oh, I'm going to go pick up that shirt from their booth, which is over there. Yep. So no one even has to say anything. You just like see it. You go, I like that shirt. I don't know what it means. I'm just going to go to the booth. But it like just by proxy of getting that many people coming to the booth, you're probably going to get some people interested in it, and then it grows from there. So see it that way. Yeah,
which I guess is win-win. I mean, you're never going to be mad someone's just wearing the shirt, even if they don't know what it is. But when I worked there, I was an intern there for a few months, and so when we would do festivals, that was the big thing, was that if someone came to the booth and wanted a shirt or not, was just hanging around, like, you really wanted to give the spiel and make sure they knew what it was about, and see if they were someone that maybe needed some help or a friend or whatever. So they did a really good job of that. I was in the intern program in 2008, and they'd only been around a few years, so I don't think it'd been very fine-tuned yet, but it's still cool to see. I mean, I still have like most of my shirts from there, and most of my sweatshirts and all the original stuff. So it's I definitely look to them as like the original, them and stuff like Invisible Children, as far as being that connected and being that like, I don't know. I have to think To Write Love was probably one of the first like nonprofits that was at least big at something like Warped Tour or any festival.
I'd say so.
Yeah, I would believe that too.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, so you were on Mike Herrera's of MXPX podcast, and something that I saw that stood out in your book was that he started talking about multiple realities here.
No. Yeah.
What's going on here?
Oh man. No, I only say, oh no, because I was so thrown off by him asking that. Well, and that was what made it so funny, was that I'm already like floored. Like I had listened to MXPX since probably like 6th grade. Like I said, it was probably the first band I was really like obsessed with, to where I was like, okay, so you can get full sleeve tattoos and still be like a Christian guy or something, and you can look like this, wear these clothes, sound like this. Like it was just such a like door opener, I think. And I had met Mike a few times over the years and interviewed him and stuff, but to have it be reversed to where he was like, come to my home, come to my studio and be on this podcast was amazing. So to have it open with like, he started with something else and then like kind of took a few tangents and then came around to like, anyways, I was talking to someone about multiple realities. What do you think about that? And so it's just so like I'm already so nervous.
You're like, I thought we were talking about music journalism. Now why are we in sci-fi right now, guys?
I was like,
what?
Yeah. I was like, how do I steer this back to me? That's all I could do. But yeah, I was so I don't think I ever listened back to that episode either. I think I'd just be too embarrassed. But more in the writing that part in the book, I was just like, yep, it happened. So I'll brag about that. Don't ask me any detailed questions.
Don't ask me any questions about multiple realities.
This wasn't on the notes. This wasn't on the email. This was not mentioned. I don't understand how we got from A to like F over here, but
it was like A to like 25 or something instead. It was such a like I said, it was such a trip anyway, just like being in this room and knowing what was all of that was just so odd and so cool and for full circle, like I just love I hope this comes across in the book, but like the whole like too cool for school, or the whole like, oh, I saw this band back then, or I've met them, whatever. I get that, and I'm sure that I've been that person, but I think as I get older, I just want to be like, no, like it's cool to freak out about cool stuff. It's fine to be like, yeah, I listened to this band in 7th grade and now I get to sit at the table with him and ask him whatever I want. Or he's going to ask me questions. Like enjoy that weirdness of life. Enjoy that you made it from, like if I could ever just shake this person's hand, wouldn't that be insane? To they're asking you questions about your career. Like enjoy that weirdness for sure.
There's another reality where that never happened for you.
Oh my God.
It's a split timeline.
Yeah.
Oh God.
We've talked about it on our podcast a couple of times. I'm a big fan of it. So like,
yeah, except the thing is we kind of like go into it. It's not just a random like, hey, guess what? Like there's something that prefaces it a little bit.
Yeah.
No, and it's fascinating. I even think of like, you guys watch the show Community?
Yes.
Yeah.
They obviously have a huge timeline thing in that. And I was rewatching that a few years ago. Yeah. And I was just like, oh man, like this is really turning my brain inside out. Like this sitcom, this very silly sitcom, like, what if they did take that timeline? Where would this go?
Yeah.
And it goes on and on.
It's brilliant.
even it's fun. I've followed you guys for a while and I've listened to your episodes and stuff. And so even as I was logging on, I was like, so cool. I get to talk to Lizzie and Brian. But like as if it's, obviously as if it's like Brad Pitt and, Angelina or something. No. But just when you follow somebody for a while and you listen or you like partake in their work, it is a funny thing to just be like, oh, and I get to talk to them. Like it's a thing that you admire and then you get to be like on, at the same table. It's really cool.
Is a parasocial relationship? Is that what it's called? Like
codependent, I think.
Maybe.
Oh God.
I'm like, I need this music or I can't function.
I can't do it.
But it's like knowing somebody through art or something. Like we now have this experience of like there are people we know, but they don't know us. And we only know them in a certain filter through either their art or their creations or their content or being a person on a podcast, being a person on YouTube, being a person in a movie that we really like, playing a character. Yeah. It's like, and now we know all the stuff about this person, but we don't know that person and they don't know us. And it's like, to then sit face to face with them, I'm sure it's just like, you're real, like you actually exist and you're not just the words in your song or you're not just the person on the video or whatever.
Yeah, and just to embrace the title of my book, Namedropping, I feel like there were so many bands that I got to sit down with where I had that exact thing where it was somebody big to me, let's say like Adam Lazara from Taking Back Sunday or something, like where it was somebody that was really big to me and important to me. And rather than being nervous, it felt like seeing an old buddy, because you were like, oh, I know so much about you. This conversation is going to be easy. And you sit down and you're very like casual, like, oh, what's up, man? And shake hands and all that. And you're like, oh, that's right. You don't know me at all.
Exactly.
I just think I do because I'm a super fan. You're like, ah.
Yeah. You're like, sorry. Yeah. Let me explain. You don't know one thing about me, and I know quite a bit about you. And that's very off balance.
I feel like that's so validating because, at least for me, because I've been doing like interviews for so long that I have had friends who've been like, oh my God, I like met this like a person who's in like an indie band that we really like. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And they're like, oh, like I kind of freaked out. I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, don't you? And I'm like, I feel like at this point, because I've been so used to talking with people in like the industry and like working in like media, that it doesn't faze me as much. Now, like when I was this close away from Frank Iero at the Riot Fest press box, I definitely hit my friend in excitement because I didn't know, like head went empty and I went burr because I didn't know what to do. And I was freaking out. So I feel like unless it's like a very, very large band like that, for me personally, I would be pretty nonchalant, I guess. I'd be very open to it. So it's always good because I'm like, I don't want to sound like I'm frigid or like, like, you know, talking myself. It's like, no, it's just very normal because I'm just trying to talk to another person as if, you know, they are just a regular person, really, day in and day out.
Yeah. And I think, like, I don't know about you guys, but I would also get down on myself thinking like, yeah, I just interviewed, you know, Adam or like Dustin from Thrice or something. But then I think, but the average person on the street doesn't know who these people are. Like they're big to me, but they're not Bono. They're not Dave Grohl or something. So who cares? Like I would, which is very silly. Like it should just still be awesome and a big deal. But like I was one of the last Warped Tours I went to, CKY played. And I loved like Bam and Jackass and CKY, like the old CKY videos for years and years. So to see them play and to see them like hanging out backstage and like being goofy to each other and like, you know, one guy like dumped water on the, you know, a very stupid, obviously not a very cool Jackass prank. But just seeing them be like a little bit as what I expected, I was like, that's okay. Like I'm pretty starstruck right now. I'm pretty like, that's a thing that only exists on my TV. And now it's in front of me. That's pretty weird.
Yeah. How do you? I mean, I've said to Lizzie many times that I'm very not good at talking to people, but I also think it's that situation. Like, if I meet a band at a show, or more recently, if I meet somebody who is DJing an event, right? Like that's a thing where like band or a singer or something will like show up at a DJ night and they'll be talking there. We've had a couple good experiences with that because we do Emo Night LA here in Chicago. I DJ and my friend is doing it, so we hang out, and then there's just like all of a sudden it's William Beckett of the Academy and we're just hanging out with him in the green room and having a normal friendly conversation. And it's just the conversation just flows really well. But I think it's like, well, we're both here on an even playing field now. We're both DJing. We're both just standing here at the same place and we can just talk because we're both doing the exact same thing right now. But if I'm in the crowd and I see Keith Buckley of Every Time I Die, I'm just like, maybe I don't want to bother him. Like he's busy. I don't want to talk to him.
Isn't that funny? It's almost like they don't know I'm nobody. They don't know I'm not as big deal as they are.
Oh my God.
Look, there I stood right next to Bradley of Emarosa, and I was like, we're the same right now. I mean, you leave and you're in Emarosa, but I'm right here right now.
We're the same person right now, dude.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. It's funny. I had this list when I was younger of like all the bands, and especially singers that I like. My goal was to interview, and that list, like I feel like I did pretty well with it, and then I'd add people over time. But since you mentioned William Beckett, I'd done interviews with him, like phoners and stuff. And I never got to sit down with him in person. So a few years ago in Portland, like I had it all set up. I was so stoked to do it. And he was just doing like a solo show. And he had some fans there that were like really taking up his time. It was like a mother and daughter who were just like punishing him in a corner, like legitimate. Yeah. Like legitimately had him cornered. Yeah, I remember a few band friends saying, "Yeah, we call them punishers, just the people that like don't realize that you only get a question or two, and maybe you should politely move on." They just like, yeah, they monopolize all your time. So this mother and daughter are just like going after him so hard. He's being so nice, but I'm like checking my watch, just like I want to go home. Like I want to get this done. I got to go home. And so his tour manager came by, and I can't remember who it was, but I was like, hey, do you think you can kind of nudge him, like, you know, so we can get moving on this? And he goes, yeah, totally. And he yells across this venue. There's maybe still like 50 kids in there. He goes, hey, Bill. He goes, this dude wants to kick your ass. and points at me, and he just looks like scared. And I was like trying to like laugh, like, oh, that's a funny joke between us three. But I look, and the tour manager's just like already out the door. He just said that and left. And I was like, that was really funny, but I'm not getting this now. And he just hung out with them, and I was like, I just bailed out and left. But
damn,
that was my, yeah, this dude wants to kill you. I was so bummed. So I don't know that'll ever happen now. Yeah. I feel like he's not too popular these days.
He was very nice with us.
Yeah.
very friendly conversation to us. So you never know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he leaves Chicago very much. Obviously not right now, but I feel like
right.
Oh, that's true. You guys have so many good bands from there.
We try to keep them, but they all move to California.
Yeah, they all move or have some problems happen, and then we're like, never mind. We find a new band and be like, this is the band. I swear to God, if you are problematic, I'm going to physically kick your ass, actually. From across the state. I'm going to kick your ass, and it's on site. Stop it.
I like just in the last 10 seconds, I was like, man, like you guys really, I thought of one or two, like Academy is and Alkaline, but I was like, you also have Motion. Mm-hmm. More recently, I know they got some trouble, but you had Sleep on It. Yep. We're good dudes. And yeah, there's a ton of stuff that comes out of Chicago.
Got that pop punk scene here where a lot of people, I don't know, I just get mad about like Fall Out Boy and Alkaline Trio moving to California, and it's just like, don't get too popular, don't get too big, otherwise you're gonna leave. You're gonna get to
and they're considered like, I bet Fall Out Boy is considered more of a like California band maybe now, and to some people, but
I think like people who are like in their newer cycle, they're definitely like, yes, they're California, because you know that's what a lot of their newer stuff is. It's a little bit more poppier.
Sure.
And it's like, no, they're from here. Patrick Stubb can't stop singing about how much he fucking loves Chicago. It's in every single song. I swear to God.
I feel like it's the first record, and then there's that EP they put out before they did the Wrigley Field show here. Lake Effect Kid, but they had a couple other songs on there that were all about Chicago.
It was literally,
like, I'm like, are you just trying to remind people from Chicago that you are from Chicago?
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to like if you don't.
There's no way that any of them probably still live there, right?
No, they're all California.
They're all over there.
Yeah. Okay.
Or one of them is Andy lives in. He might live in Portland. He might live in Seattle or Portland or something.
Oh yeah, because he has Oracle Coffee. He has his coffee shop. I've been there before. Very good coffee.
I was gonna say, if anyone, I bet Andy maybe would be like, no, I just still live right next to my parents.
Yeah,
like I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't go to LA.
Yeah.
I would say maybe behind like the Long Island, as far as like the era we're talking about, behind like Long Island and Jersey basement shows, like Chicago would be close second. I mean, certainly third to like breeding most of those bands.
Yeah. Midwest in general had a lot. I know there are some that are like Hawthorne Heights, Ohio is close enough. I'm like, well, we're not taking them, but like we could say, you know, they're nearby enough.
That's true.
Not a lot from Iowa. Not a lot from
no, just Slipknot.
Slipknot.
I don't know any other band from Iowa. Well,
I don't know
there's another band from Iowa, Stars Hollow. They're like a newer emo band. They're really good. I've met them before. They're really, really nice guys. I don't know anybody. I don't know any other bands from Iowa besides them.
Yeah.
Like
I was going to say, I don't think I know any people or bands other than Slipknot from Iowa. Yeah. But hey, they put Iowa on the map.
They did. You know what? They made us all aware of it.
Children of the Corn with the mask. That's it. Right. That's what we are. Hello.
Yep. Get out of here, wheat. We're taking over.
We're at about an hour, so cool. I want to make sure we have your time for plugs here, so you can throw out where everybody can get the book, when it's released and all that, and where everybody can find you on the internet, find out more, follow you for You've been posting a lot of photos on your Instagram of like hanging out with old bands. So like it's been one of those rides of like, this is me at this Warped Tour. This is me over here. And I'm like, it's pretty cool. So I would recommend following you on Instagram if you want to throw that one out there too.
Yeah. It's just at Namedropping Book. And that's been the goal is to certainly like every Thursday, I'm like, yeah, Throwback Thursday. Cause that's all I have. Because no one's been outside in a year and a half. So
yeah,
everything's a throwback inherently. But yeah, that Instagram is the best place for right now, at Namedropping Book. And I definitely respond to everything. And I just want, like, the biggest thing is just connecting with people. But I mean, to connect with people that were around during that time for sure. And to have, I love hearing stories of like, well, I met this person and they were great and they said this funny thing or they signed this thing. Like, to just hear those positive stories and encounters, I think are really cool, because I think that's hopefully what this book is mostly about. And then also just the power of the music has over all of us that some people might not consciously think about. I think the more that I wrote the stories, I was like, oh, this really dictated like where I went for the last 15 years. 20 to 35 is pretty important time. Yeah. So, to be like, oh, I've had this thing in the background or in the forefront that was kind of dictating my next move all the time. But yeah, a Namedropping Book. The book will be out July 16th. It just got pushed back, so July 16th. But everything as far as the info and stuff will be on the Instagram, which I will gladly blast everybody with as soon as it is ready to go. But it's also just been really cool to see. You guys just had Mike DeMonte on. Like I've been talking to him about being on mine as well. And I think when I started writing the book, I was like, maybe no one's going to like this because there isn't books about this yet. Like maybe it's too current. I remember like going to the bookstore as a kid and being like, how come I can't find a book about Green Day or about Dashboard? And then I'm like, oh, because it's still happening. Like no one's written a book about it yet. And now I feel like everyone that was around during those years are now writing books about it. Like Mike, another book called From the Basement by Taylor Markarian. There's just all these people now that are like, we're old enough. We've been journalists for a long time. Maybe a book is the next step. And you're getting to see history that was 10, 15, 20 years ago that still feels like it was yesterday. So I hope my book is like alongside books like Taylor's and Mike's. So hopefully.
I think that's a really interesting prospect, because I also know Dan Ozzie is coming out with a book too, kind of looking at like the mainstream like emo pop punk, but like a deeper dive. And I also just wanted to wonder too, I've seen with a lot of current music journalism, especially with like more independent publications, something that I've personally as a journalist has seen is that there's a lot of people being I don't want to say wishy-washy, but very careful with their wording. And there's not a lot of harder questions being asked anymore. Yeah. Whereas you see a lot of these like more veteran like music journalists and music writers saying like, hey, what is this? Like, let's talk about this. Whereas now I feel that it's kind of like secondary of a press release, but for free.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen it happen with some fairly popular, like currently popular, like independent and DIY spaces. And I'm just wondering what people think about that who have gone through like kind of like the OG development of like really prime music journalists in like the early 2000s to like looking back on how it is now.
Yeah, that's I love that, because it's absolutely true. And I started to think, I mean, when I was younger, you don't want to ruffle any feathers either. Like you're just starting out in the industry. Sometimes you're told by a publicist what not to ask about. And inherently you do want to be like, oh, well, now I know what I'm going to ask.
Good, but I'm going to do it though.
Yeah, because clearly there's some juicy stuff here. But yeah, when you're younger and you're starting out, you're like, you need all those connections. You need all that networking. So you're not going to like ruffle any feathers. You're not going to piss anyone off. And I just think as you get older, for one, I think you can navigate that better. You can maybe present it in a better way to get to where you really want to go. Or I feel like the last few years, I've kind of not cared as much, and not even in a reckless way, but in just thinking like, is someone going to read this article and be like, well, the last 10 articles I read were the same questions or the same angle. So if I want to stand out and if I want to do the subject justice, like I do have to get a little weird and a little out of the box. And I also feel like from my experience, I've never had someone like shut down an interview or be like, I don't want to talk about that. Maybe in like a respectful way, but nothing where I didn't get what I wanted, I think, out of it. So I think that the subjects, the bands that we're talking about, they get tired of answering the same 2 or 3 things. Like when I worked at Substream, as I was an editing manager there for a little bit, and I had about 25, 30 writers at any time. And I would always say, like, if you Google this question that you're wanting to ask and you can find it in another article, like if you find it within the next 5, 10 articles that come up on Google, like you're not allowed to ask it. Like don't ask what the reporting process was like. Don't ask questions that could be asked to any band in the entire universe. Like get specific, show that you did research, show that you watched other interviews with them. Before I do any interview, I want to watch at least like 10 to 15 recent interviews with that band and then not ask any of those things or piggyback off something that maybe didn't go deep enough on. So I hope that it's getting better. I hope that it's getting to the point where people feel confident to ask the tougher things without assuming that they're just going to like storm out of an interview or something. There's deeper stuff people want to go into. And anytime I've been thanked by a band for like, oh, thanks for bringing that up because we'd like to talk about that, but no one really ever asked. That's like the highest compliment, which I'm sure you guys get a lot because clearly you guys do good research too.
I hope so. I hope people are thinking it. We've had a couple people say it, but I'm like, I hope everyone's thinking it.
I hope everybody thinks it. I mean, I will say that advice is really big. Like that's stuff they have told me throughout my like how long have I been in school? 7, 8 years in like journalism school. Is like you have to dig deeper. And I'm just always like I don't want to be an antagonizer, but it's you just want to know more because the biggest joke is like you go into an interview and you say, how did you get your band name? Or how did you get whatever name? Or like, how did this come together? Everyone's just like, these are such basic, open-ended, easy bullshit questions. And then when you try to also like, I had like commented or something about it. There was some band, I don't remember what band it was. And they were saying it. And I was like, this is pretty common for like younger kids in like journalism school or just learning how to do interviews in general. And I'm like, if you as a band are going to be so vehemently like mad about it though, and then like also because it seemed like they were kind of apprehensive about certain things to be asked. I'm like, you can't really give that much critique or criticism. You have to be opened up to it. Now, that's to say somebody can walk in and ask something that's just like way too invasive. Obviously, there's boundaries, but I think that it's just become there's so much like. I just want to like please these other people and make them like me rather than just tell the story because I feel that at least for music journalism and music writing, it has become such a big like I'm here and now like I'm a part of this weird like influencer celebrity networking thing that like didn't really exist before. Like I worked in a like traditional newsroom and I've been like, oh yeah, there's this like I know when I work with Give this shit that I've interviewed, like whatever band, they're like, I don't know who the fuck that is. And I'm like, cool. I think it's just like that. It's like, oh no, I can do this and I can report it down the line or ask these hard questions. I just think that there's just something there. It's just such a weird disconnect in what I'm seeing nowadays.
Yeah. And I hope that continues to change. Like I have had experiences where as I was being led to the green room by a tour manager saying, hey, just so you know, don't ask about this. Don't talk about his ex-wife. Don't ask why this member left. And it's not even like I want to be a jerk and just be like, yeah, now I'm going to ask those questions. But just for one, like on the way to the interview, like he could be tearing apart everything that I've spent, that week writing about. And not to say that they owe us everything and they need to talk about everything, but I've also said, before the interview started, hey, are you cool talking about, this member that left or that you just got out of rehab? Is that cool? And I don't think I've ever had anyone say no. I think that a lot of bands, especially bigger bands, are pretty handled by their managers and their publicists without them knowing. And managers and publicists might tell you beforehand, like, yeah, hey, maybe don't bring this or that up. And then it comes up naturally and they're an open book about it. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I think I told this story in the book, but I was interviewing Serge he was doing a solo show, but Serge, the singer from System of a Down. And he had a solo record out. And I was like, already, of course, super intimidated by this guy. Like, has been around the block forever. He's like an ambassador to like the UN, like just someone that's like, I know, insanely way smarter than me. And so we did our interview. He was super kind and super polite. And I was like, hey, like after the interview, I was like, hey, I recently saw that he had done something. He's like a big advocate for the government to basically recognize an Armenian genocide from years and years back. Yeah, and so I like kind of stumbled through like, hey, I just saw you do this thing. Hey, that's really cool. And just trying to like, not that you can chit chat about genocide, but I said something like that to him, like that's pretty amazing. And he goes, well, like the background to that, right? And I was like, like a little bit just from like researching you, but like not a ton. And I'm like packing my stuff up. And he's like, well, I can tell you about it. I was like, I don't want to take up any more of your time. And he's like, no, sit down. This is important.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Yes, I will. And then like 20 minutes of him like giving me this amazing history lesson on that. And so, and not that would have made great fodder for, a 1,000-word article or something, but I think if you don't push for that stuff, you're just never going to find out. And sometimes there's a disconnect between them and the publicists, and they're like, no, I can talk about that. That's fine. Or, I could have done this interview at this time. I don't know why you thought that. So I don't think you should ever circumvent the system and go around a publicist or a manager or whatever contact. But there's been so many times, where I've just found out they're like, oh, no, I never said that. I'll do that interview with you. Or here's my number. Just call me next week and we'll do it. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a point with that.
This is about to get real confident real quick in a lot of our interviews.
God.
I know.
Hey, I went up at Riot Fest to Frank Iero's manager and I said, 5 minutes, sir. And he said, no. You are probably like, no, you're a child. Probably not like that. But I was definitely like 20 and terrified as shit. It's like, please. And he was like, no. And I harassed this man for 15 minutes. And he said no. And I said, you know what? I gave him my best. Goodbye.
See, and I love that because I feel like anytime I hear a story about someone that's like, and I persisted and I got it, I get so inspired and I think I'm going to do that next time, like in whatever realm I'm in. And it just never works.
The most you can do is just be nice about it. And if they say no, you can always, what I found is that you can always email them later, like after usually like a fest, because I've done Riot Fest press a few times and Warped Tour too. You can try to set something up outside of it and be like, hey, we tried to do this, but obviously, it was too busy, whatever. And then you just be nice about it. And then you can, sector it off for later. So that has happened. Yeah. So, and I taught my radio kids to do that too, and it's worked for some of them. One of the girls actually did end up interviewing Frank Iero, so.
You're super pissed at her.
So.
Yeah. No, like Warped Tour, the first few times I did Warped Tour, I was like, I hadn't done really a big festival for press. And for one, just coming up to the table and being like, so I can just sign up for whoever I want. Like I'm just signing my name on every big name there is outside of like whoever I'd already arranged with. And then you learn like that doesn't mean you're going to get them. They might not even show up. Who knows? But at the same time, I remember at 1 year just having like, I was doing interviews for Heart Support and I just had this like assembly line of bands coming through because there wasn't a lot of press, and having to be like, hang on, Hawthorne Heights, I got to talk to Scary Kids. All right, Scary Kids, let's get talking about this. Because JT's like just all of a sudden being like, I'm just ordering around my like heroes here and being like, you'll get your turn just to like make it still work. Yeah. And then having to be like, sorry, Goldfinger, can you wait like 30 minutes? Come back. But also awesome.
Yeah. Well, Jameson, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for hanging out with us on the pod. Everybody who's listening, please go check out the book, Namedropping, when it drops. Can you give the date again, just so we have it?
Yeah, July 16th. It'll be
July 16th. So go pick up the book. Check out Namedropping Pod on Instagram to get a little nostalgia kick every week. And thanks again for hanging out with us on the pod.
Thank you guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, of course.